agriculture being natural resource intensive, within your framework, it looks a little bit like there are, as if there were no externalities or environmental externalities, when you say the abundant factor should always be the relatively inexpensive. So what happens if a country has abundance in fresh water or forests that are, or in ocean access, which are of global importance and can cause global governance problems? How is that factored in your framework?
My name is Babatunde Omilola. I work for United Nations Development Program. And my question is actually how you think this framework that you have highlighted here can be applied in the African case. I'm saying this because many African countries are very small countries and they have small economies, and many of them are not able to compete properly globally. So in terms of regional cooperation, regional dimension of how this framework can be used, by looking at how African countries can come together, look at where they have comparative advantage, look at where resources are abundant in different African countries, and how they can actually tap into that. That's my first question. I have two more quick questions. The second one is actually what you are going to do with this new structural economics framework. After talking about it, after expanding a lot about it, is the World Bank going to adopt it as a strategy that developing countries can begin to tap into? That's the second question.
Can we maybe defer the third question so we can have the other ones?
It's a very quick one.
Okay.
It's a very quick one.
Yes.
You know, I struggled so much to find out what is actually new about the new structural economics that you have proposed. And I think what is new to me is that countries should look at comparative advantage and look at how the government can play a facilitating role. But this, you say, should be industry specific. And I am thinking that maybe in the reality, it might be difficult if you want to look at the whole industrial economy of a particular country. So I would want you to just talk about how that can be applied to the overall industrial economy of many countries. Thank you.
My name is Hans Dembowski. I work for the development magazine D+C, Development Corporation. And I wonder if you have any advice for the supposedly advanced nations. Because I just heard a lecture of Achim Steiner of the United Nations Environment Program, who said that increasingly the rich nations are perceived as the problem, not as the area where the solutions are. We have unsustainable debt problems, we have high levels of emissions, and so on. Now, do you have any suggestions how the advanced nations can advance some more? And secondly, if the advanced nations, the forerunners, are not advancing anymore, what does it mean for the follow-up nations?
Okay. When I read your paper, which you, I think, publish or are going to publish in the World Bank Research Observer, which is close to the presentation, I thought of Timothy Besley's work, London School of Economics, who makes a distinction of authoritarian regimes. So my question is, to what extent do you need that good type of authoritarian regime that is subject itself to some competition within the government? That's the first question. The second question is, could you imagine that you could extend your scheme also to services, to the services sector?
The first one regarding the externality like forest sectors. We know that it's a global public good. And for a country with huge forest, certainly the preservation of the forest contributing to global public good. But they will sacrifice the opportunity for cutting the tree, turn that into log, and turn into furniture and so on. Under that, certainly they need to be compensated for that. And we do have a global initiative to compensate for those kind of externalities. And so for resources-rich country, the government should be actively try to, help the farmers or forest sectors to tap into the potential of the global initiative to compensate for their global public good. In effect, a number of African countries already are doing quite well on that. They have natural resources preservation, but they receive compensation from the global green initiative and something like that. Okay. Then the second one, regarding the African countries are small economies. From what I see, small economy is not necessarily at disadvantages. Because if you look into the highest income country in the world today, in general, are small economies. And the reason is that what you have to develop, certainly you need to have a structural transformation. And the difference between large economy and a small economy is that large economy can specialize on many, many different sectors. In a small economy, you need to specialize on less sectors. Like in Switzerland, they may only have 3 or 4 sectors, like banking sectors, pharmaceutical, and then jewelry and watch, and then tourism. But Germany is a large economy. You have many, many sectors, right? So the difference is that the small economy is specialized on less economy, less sectors. And like Mauritius is the highest income countries in Africa, right? And Mauritius focus on textile and garment, and then a little bit fishery, a little bit tourism. So I think that small economy, as long as you well chosen your sectors, specialize that, you can be competitive, you can be high income country. And then regarding, when you try to turn the latent competitive advantages into actual competitive advantages, you need to have a government facilitation, as I mentioned, sometimes even some kind of compensation for the first movers, some kind of subsidies. How to avoid the political captures? In effect, in my framework, political capture is not a big issue. In the past, industrial policy easily turned into some kind of elite capture. Was because in the past, the sector promoted by the industrial policies, certainly also latent, also new, but they went against their competitive advantages. Firm in those kind of sectors is not viable. So the government need to give them huge subsidy and protection. That's one thing. And secondly, in general, because they require huge subsidy and protection, the government can only support 1 firm or 2 firms. And we know that when rent is large and number of players is small, then it's very easy to be captured. But the sectors I'm promoting, first, it's consistent with your competitive advantages. And since it's consistent with your competitive advantages, the subsidies is to compensate for externalities. And so the subsidy requirement is very small, maybe tax holidays for a few years, or some kind of preferential access to credit or foreign exchanges, because in many developing countries there's some control on that. But those kind of rent is very small. And secondly, because that sector is consistent with your competitive advantages, so many firms can enter. We know that if the rent is very small and the player is a lot, then elite only have 24 hours. And their capital is also, their reputational capital is also limited. So I don't think elite will have the incentive to capture that. And whether it's required to have the authoritarian regime, not necessary. We see, as I mentioned, Mauritius, it's a democratic societies. Again, Ireland is also a democratic societies. But if you look into the success of Ireland before late 1980s and after 1980s, the difference is that Ireland after 1980s, they target selective sectors. Before 1980s, they have industrial policies, and they did not target any sectors. So as a result, they could not form clusters. And after 1980s, they target only 4 sectors: pharmaceutical, chemical, software, and the computer industries. And they were successful. And they are democratic society. So I don't think an authoritarian regime is a necessary condition. And this can also be applied to service sectors. Because for me, I call industry can include agriculture, natural resources and the service sectors. But even in the service sectors, you need also to follow your competitive advantages. Like India today, we're very successful in the service sectors. But if you look into the operation of service sectors in India, compared to the information service sector in the US, India focuses on the labor-intensive part, like call centers, and then programming, right? And now with the wage rate increase, India is losing competitive advantage in call centers. So other countries like Philippines and so on, or Kenya, they can also go into the labor-intensive information services like call centers. So I think the similar approach applied.
Thank you very much. Maybe then over coffee we can discuss what lessons you can have for the industrialized world, how they can upgrade.
Oh, the industrialized world, okay. Sorry, I remember, okay. I think my approach should also apply. But the difference is that for the country in the catching up process, they have competitor country they can imitate. So it's easier to identify the sectors and then do the necessary facilitation. But for the high-income country, it's harder to identify the sectors. But the government, again, need to identify. And the government also need to facilitate. And for the high-income country, the way they're doing the facilitation and identification is that patent is a facilitation, right? A support, an incentive. Patent did not have sector-specific, so it did not have an identification because it's export. But other than that, other government facilitation always has some kind of identification. For example, we know that for the high-income country, innovation to them means invention. And the government support basic research, right? Those kind of basic research have externality to commercial product development. And when the government support basic research, because the government budget is limited, so they also need to allocate which basic research they wanted to support. And when they identify which basic research they want to support, they already identify what kind of possibility for success. And if it's successful, they are successful, what kind of technology, what kind of new product they can contribute to. And the government need to do that. The government can do that with consultation with science community, technology community, and business community, right? In addition to that, the government always use some kind of procurement. Again, procurement means you already identify something you like to buy, right? Or some kind of mandate to say 10 years from now, how many percentage of product should be in this kind of technology, and they have identification. So I think the framework that I have means that in a high-income country, actually today, although they always say they go against industrial policies, but I like to say all the high-income countries, especially the dynamically growing high-income country, they are all actively practice industrial policy. They are all actively picking winners. But certainly, the chance of value of picking winners in high-income country will be higher. The chance of failure will be higher than a developing country following my framework. However, picking winners is something necessary if the government really want to play the role of facilitation.
Thank you very much, Justin Lin. I think this was an excellent start to this meeting, excellent presentation, excellent discussion. So we now have a coffee break.